sparring session, looks like the first half. I guess some turnovers. Didn't quite look like a complete team first half. Going into the locker room, what were your words for the team?
Yeah, I was happy with the first half and the second half, I would say. I felt like it was, as you've alluded to, it felt more back and forth in the first half. It felt like we gave as good as we got. I think we created some really good chances, not least the moment for the penalty. We looked a threat in the ways that we typically are a threat, but that fizzled out in the second half, unfortunately. And we were very reliant on real discipline, a real desperation to keep the ball out of the back of the net, a collective will to get over the line, and ultimately a real belief in what we do to make life difficult for teams, and why we are where we are, I suppose, after 34 games in the league and a good cup run and into this hopefully a deep run in the playoffs. So it wasn't spectacular, but it was effective, and we've ultimately got what we wanted.
These penalty shootouts in the playoffs must be old hat at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can pick up on it with some of the characters that we've got. We've got guys that are they're showmen to an extent. With Dane, I think he loves those moments. I don't think you'll find a guy who's more in his element than penalty shootouts at the Allianz. And Dane, I think he's really expectant of himself in those moments. And then the other guys, largely, they did what was required of them. And it's not easy. They're horrible situations to be in, I think, for coaches, for players. And you need players with real steel and real determination and real self-belief. And we've showed that across a number of them, but obviously none more so than Dane. And he does make life very difficult for the penalty takers.
Kirk, what was your view on the penalty shout for?
Yeah, I mean, clear cut a penalty as I've seen not given over the course of this year. I'd be amazed if 99 refs out of 100 don't look at that for 5 seconds and think that's a penalty. I think it's a real shame in a sense, because you have to be able to trust officials in those moments that you're going to get stuff like that, particularly with VAR these days. And that was I'm glad I can stand here as the winning coach, because I think with that not being the case, that would have been a real tough pill to swallow.
Heading of the match, you mentioned you had to shut down Jordan Morris to make sure you were shutting down Seattle effectively. How do you think the team did that tonight?
Yeah, I think we weren't pleased with the number of chances that we gave away, but I would say by and large they were half chances. I didn't feel like we gave away, minus perhaps the one at the end, big clean cut chances. I think we were always in a position where we were defending with good numbers. We were defending with good pressure on the ball around the top of the box. I think Jordan Morris looked like a threat in behind in the opening stages of the game, but I think we got that right very quickly and adjusted to the extent that he was fairly quiet from that point onwards. But I think they're a really tough team to play against, and they finished beneath us, and we've had some success against them this year. But you look back in MLS history, they come into form at the right times. They've got a really deep squad. They've got some really good players, and almost getting better by the week at the moment in terms of availability. So I think it's not a small achievement that we've been able to be so competitive and ultimately win the game.
Eric, obviously it's the result that you wanted. What would you like to see improve from game 1 to game 2 in your mind?
Yeah, I think what's tough is the change of context, obviously, in the second game. I've sort of stressed to the players and when I spoke to you guys that I think these best of 3 rounds, that it's a really interesting dynamic. You have to make sure that you take one game at a time. I think MLS, maybe more than most leagues, is one that gives you a very distinct feel, home and away, when you account for travel, when you account for going to play in an NFL stadium. That's it feels big there. The pitch feels vast. You really have to defend what feels like big open spaces against a really good team. And I think if they get a good crowd on the day, it's a really hard place to go. So I won't read too much into this game when we talk about some of the messaging ahead of that last one, but the next one, should I say? But we've got something to go on, in the sense that when we went there, I thought we played really well early on in the season in difficult circumstances, and we were a really good version of ourselves on that day, and that is what is required when we go there. It's a very tough matchup in a very tough place to go, and they now are fighting for their lives in the tie, and we got to make sure that we try and get it done in 2.
For the 3 guys that converted, obviously Kelvin could really use that. What did you like about his take there?
Yeah, it's hard not to sort of underdo the praise with Kelvin, because he's a phenomenal penalty taker and has shown up for us on every single occasion. I think it's been pretty defining for us since he's been here. Someone who has, again, in the same way that Dane does, a real feel for a big moment. He's I think it's rare to see two players that are so comfortable being front and centre. They absorb a lot of attention, and he's shown up again in the way that he has every single time that he's been called upon. So we're very fortunate to have him in those moments.
As you look back at sort of these last 5 or 6 games that you've been playing without a sort of recognized number 9 at the top, where do you sort of rate tonight's performance in terms of creation and offense?
I think anyone who's watched us over the course of the season will be able to appreciate that this it's not an easy spell of the season for us in any way, and we're pushing really hard to try and find solutions. We're pushing hard for people to show real adaptability and a willingness to self-sacrifice to an extent. I don't think anyone would have expected that we would go into these playoffs feeling phenomenal about the form we are in, the options we have, the way things look in comparison to the way they did a couple of months ago. But the one thing I could count on tonight was that we would give every ounce to make sure that we carried the game plan out, and the players have done that, and Bongi is a great example of that. So Bongi's playing as a number 9, where he's played 95% of the year as a wing back or a notch higher up maybe, but it was a selfless performance, and that's what it needed there. And we've got a dressing room that's full of those characters. So I think if you're not going into games feeling on top of the world, you have to at least look at the dressing room and feel like everyone's going to go to war, and they did that.
You mentioned earlier that you felt like most officials would give Bongi that penalty. How do you feel about the overall officiating tonight? This was a match where your team was issued 5 yellow cards. Seattle was issued none, though they did commit 5 more fouls than you.
Yeah, it did. Again, I don't typically want to dwell too much on the referee's performance. I felt like it was justified to probably stand here and be a bit critical of the penalty incident, and I think I did in general feel like it was one of the more one-sided performances from the officials. But again, it's far easier to talk about that when I'm in the position that I'm in, and maybe I'd be speaking differently if that wasn't the case.
Coach, when you go back after this game to kind of look through the tape as you look ahead to the match in Seattle, what are some key moments for this particular game that you're thinking about? Maybe we could have excelled a little bit better. Maybe we can work on this as we prepare for this travel that's coming up for the second leg.
Yeah, I think we were, to be honest, uncharacteristically lacking in real conviction in duels and tackles around the top of the box. As much as we were there in good numbers and we got good pressure on the ball to an extent. I think if you were to watch the last 20-25 minutes back, we missed some big moments in 50-50 battles that were just so crucial, and that's not like us. So for sure that's something that I'll pick up on with the players. And I think as the game transpired, we found ourselves defending the box for certainly for longer than we like, and in those moments, in order to have your share of the game, in order to work your way up the pitch, you're reliant on some real composure from the players and personality to take the ball and an ability to connect with one another and work your way up the pitch, make good decisions between counter-attacking quickly and not counter-attacking, and moving up the pitch in a much more connected way. And I think we lacked that in the first half. Second half, should I say. I was actually really pleased with how we started the second half. We started with a flurry of energy, momentum, whipped the crowd up really well, really good on the first, second, third phase of set plays. And I felt like it was going to be one of those classic Minnesota performances, facing the one wall in the second half, and unfortunately we fizzled out. And I think it was partly to do with that. We were weak where we should have been. Well, we should have been strong and typically are strong, and then we turned the ball over really cheaply. So I think if we're going to go there and not find ourselves in that situation for longer than we would like, we certainly have to work on that. But I'll say when we were there early on in the season, we did a good job in that sense there. So we have a reference point at least.
You didn't get the result against Galaxy, obviously, like you wanted in the final match. Did you feel that you saw the type of response from your team in training this week and leading up to this match that really kind of showed you that there was some maybe a little extra chippiness in training we saw at times?
Yeah.
But how do you feel about the response?
No, there wasn't. I think that was a real silver lining from Galaxy, and by design to an extent. I'm not professing to have foreseen how it's panned out since that point, but we obviously experimented at Galaxy, we stepped away from doing what we've done for a lot of the season in order to try and force a little bit of versatility, adaptability, maybe be pleasantly surprised. And I think in some senses then having the opportunity to fall back into what we do so well probably gives the players some comfort. I wasn't then scratching around for some messages to push to the players to try and make us a more competitive team coming into this week. It was very easy to fall back on what we've done so far. So I think that was helpful in a sense, and it was a real silver lining. And I would say that just the comfort that we've had in our position almost, and this is a failing on our part in so many senses, but it's bred a little bit of that complacency. It's been the perfect storm of being fairly comfortable in terms of home advantage in the playoffs. As much as all the messages have been about trying to take the places above us and whatnot, it's been the perfect storm of that situation. The obvious absences and changes to the squad, and I'm really pleased tonight that we haven't let it fizzle out in the way that maybe it felt that we might. So I think tonight we've shown some real steel, and hopefully we've drawn a line now that we can step past, and we make sure that between now and the end of the year we give every ounce and we don't deviate too much from what's made us such a good team so far.
Your team has been known as kind of a set piece wizard. Do you feel there were any woes tonight with the set pieces?
No, I think it gets harder and harder to be a really successful team in that sense. But in spite of that, we have been phenomenally consistent over the course of the season, and we've got a lot of variety. We've got a framework that gives us ways of hurting the opposition in different ways, and obviously I can imagine every opposition that we face, they'll double down on the defensive work. I'm sure we'll spend a huge bulk of the prep time talking about that, so it continually becomes more difficult. But I felt tonight that in spite of the fact there was maybe nothing clean cut, it gave us momentum, it gave us energy, it gave us that connection with the crowd, and certainly there would be nothing tonight that would suggest to Seattle that we'll be any less of a threat next week. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys.